to the Sevastopol Town Hall today for our second annual Salute to Veterans program. Our little society is fairly new. We're always looking for new members. So if you're ever interested in joining us or checking us out, feel free to come to any of our meetings. Our next meeting is Monday, this November 11th at 6:30 right here at the Town Hall. Deb Logerquist will be our moderator today, so I'm going to turn the program over to her. Again, thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoy the program. There are refreshments afterwards, so thank you again.
Thank you, Linda. Now, this isn't church. If there's anybody who still needs a chair, we do have some up here in the front seats, so don't be shy. Welcome, everyone, to the Sevastopol Historical Society's Salute to Veterans. We continue to honor the service and sacrifice of our nation's veterans on November 11th, the anniversary of the end of World War I. Unlike Memorial Day, which honors those who have died in wartime, though, Veterans Day honors all those who have served in time of peace as well as war. We're going to start the proceedings here today by playing the service songs for all 5 branches of our military. So we ask that any veterans present please stand during the song for the branch that you served in, and the order will be the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard, and that's in the order in which the branches were formed. So, okay, those in the Army. Marine Corps. Navy. Air Force. Coast Guard. Yay, there's the Coastie. Okay, thank you very much, veterans. But veterans know that they're not the only ones who make sacrifices. So I'd like to ask the spouses and children of a veteran to please stand and be recognized. Come on, I know you're out there. Come on, spouses. it is my pleasure to introduce the veterans that are here with us today. We'll ask that you hold any questions that you might have until we've heard from all the speakers. So hopefully you'll have some good follow-up questions for our veterans here today. We're going to start off the program with Carl Scholz, who is a World War II veteran. He served from 1945 to 1948, and he enlisted in the Army and served as an infantry paratrooper in the Pacific Theater. He was in Guam, Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Japan. And those who know their history know that these were all major battle areas. So without further ado, Carl, we're anxious to hear some of your remembrances.
Thank you, Deb. Fellow veterans, fellow workers, one relative, my wife Ruth, and former students. I just saw David Long a few minutes ago. He's really a martyr. I don't know how many times he's come to my programs, but
They're all good.
and we have our service officer, McFarland, here too. So, welcome. I don't know where to begin, but I know where I'm going to have to end. Jenny is here with a time watch. So I'll begin with Camp Soman in San Francisco. Got there one evening in 1945, and then we fell out for orders. Next morning we had to get up at 4 in the morning, boarded a troop ship that took the Great Circle route. It was a C.G. Morton, 5,000 passengers, soldiers, all Army, and they claimed that C.G. Morton had a capacity of 8,000. I don't know how that was possible. But we started on the Great Circle route, hit a bad storm in the North Pacific, so they had to change course, but I've never seen 5,000 seasick people in my life before, and I unfortunately was one of them. But our first stop, and the battle was over on Iwo Jima, but we stopped there. I don't know why, but the Army did a lot of things that you didn't know why they did them. But we stopped there, and of course you probably remember that there are 20,000 Marines, Marine casualties. There are only Marine people, our Army, only Marine fighting on Iwo Jima. And interestingly, there was a fellow from Antigo who raised the flag on Iwo Jima after the fighting was over. It was a fellow from Antigo. But I went from Iwo Jima to Guam and spent a little time there. Interestingly, I was walking along a road in Guam, and a lady stopped and greeted me, and it was a neighbor of my closest friend, Warren. His step sister stopped and picked me up. But from Guam, I went to Saipan, spent some time there, and then from Guam, I went to Tokyo on Honshu. From Tokyo, I went to Sendai. Sendai was the headquarters, the divisional and regimental headquarters of the 11th Airborne. And I was part of the 511th Regiment, the 511th Regiment, but I was in the 2nd Battalion, Company D. D was a dog company, and there was a station in Morioka. Morioka was the forestry and ag school, ag college on Honshu. And interestingly, I had a friend, Jim Wood, who some years ago said he was going to Morioka because of their apple breeding program. And they certainly produced a lot of varieties of apple. One of them was the Fuji, and of course was named after the Fujiyama, the mountain in Japan. I was there for some time and then transferred to Hachinoi, Morioka. I went from Morioka to Hachinoi on the coast. And at Hachinoi, there are a lot of rumors floating around about the Chinese coming into Hokkaido, the northern Chinese, the Japanese island. But some of you probably have been to Fredericksburg, Texas. Anybody here ever been to Fredericksburg, Texas? You have. Well, great. You know what it's famous for. It's the Nimitz Bush Museum. Now, Admiral Nimitz was in charge of the Pacific Theater during World War II, and his home was in Fredericksburg, Texas. Well, in Fredericksburg, Texas, the Japanese came over, built a walled garden, and on that walled garden, they have plaques in recognition of ships and units that have done something, not something to them, but something for them. And one of those plaques was for the 11th Airborne. And that indicates what the Japanese nature is. You'd think they would have had a plaque indicating what we had done to them, not for them. Later, I asked for a little afterglow. There are some things on the table over there I would like to explain further. I'd like to talk about a couple people who really are heroes, and we'll talk about those. My home and my birthplace was Flag Day, and so I'd like to talk a little bit about flag and some people in this area who are very significant as far as Flag Day is concerned. So, thank you very much, and I'll be talking with you later, unfortunately.
Well, thank you very much, Carl. Thank you, Carl.
You're welcome, Deb.
Next is Bea Bircher, and she was an Army nurse in World War II. She was in the Army Nurse Corps from 1943 to 1946. And she was in Belgium and France and Germany and ended up in Holland before coming back home. So I think you'll really enjoy hearing of Bea's experiences. So welcome, Bea.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for having this honoring of all veterans. I too feel that we all feel that we need to remember what all the veterans have done. As a nurse, I went into the Army, like Deb said, in October of '43. I graduated from St. Luke's in Chicago in March of '42. So I elected to wait until that time to go to military service because many of my co-workers and friends did join immediately after Pearl Harbor Day when we graduated. So my friend, I was fortunate enough to join the service with a friend who I'd known, and we went down on Michigan Avenue and talked to a colonel, and she welcomed us, of course. So we were assigned to go to Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, where at that time we had the basic training like all military. We learned to march, we learned to take orders, we learned to crawl on our bellies across the obstacle course and climb the walls. And we weren't sure we signed up for the right service when after a couple of weeks of that. But then we found out also there wasn't a choice. So we were issued everything like all GIs were. And then we were given our orders to go someplace, but they never told us where we were going. But we were issued what we needed to get on the train, and we proceeded to be on this troop train. And the next thing we knew, we were out in we got off the train and found out we were somewhere near Yuma, Arizona. So there we got on trucks, and they took us out into that area, and there were tents all set up for us to welcome us to the U.S. Army. We were supposed to be getting ready to go into the Pacific, it was rumored. So we stayed there and had all kinds of classes and marches, and we had no patience because we were there as training, as most of the people around were also in that area for similar situations. And then on that's what we did. That's how we spent our time. They even prepared us by feeding us K rations so we would know what the food was going to be when we did get to the Pacific. So then we stayed in that area, in the California, Arizona, Mojave Desert. We would go on maneuvers. And then 3 different times we were dropped from the division that we were assigned to because they had decided that the Pacific was no place for nurses. So I'm sorry you had to go there, Carl. I always thought that we were fortunate that we didn't endure the kind of living conditions that you did. Anyway, then we were assigned to go to Camp Swift, and there we knew then we were going to the European theater, so we had some more training. And then in May of 1944, by then we knew that we were going to the European theater, and we went to New York and were processed. And then we sailed overseas on August in 1944 on the Mauritania, and we zigzagged around because, of course, at that time there were a lot of submarines, we were told. That's why our course was so disruptive. And we were glad to get off the ship, and then they toured us around, and then we were assigned to go to Cheddar, England, which was, I guess, was really a resort area, and we were billeted in private homes in our brief stay there. And we had more classes, and walked, we were from the private places we walked to our headquarters, and were assigned now to have how we would take care of the injuries wherever we would be assigned. And there we learned we would be a part of the 111th Evacuation Hospital. Then when it was time, then we went down to the Weymouth port, and we were going across the channel, and we were on an LST, which was a pretty open air kind of ship that they used. And then because we got on the ship and we stayed there for 5 days because the channel was so rough that it took that long for us to get there. So by the time we did get there, we landed at Omaha Beach on, that was at September the 4th. So of course D-Day had already come and gone. So by this time the tempo had changed, and now we realized that this was what we had been preparing for, that we were in the theater where the war was. From Omaha Beach, then we were on trucks and were transported around, and we were out in some orchard near Carentan, France, which had been liberated not too long before. So then we unpacked all of the gear that we had and got an idea of what a tent hospital would be like. We were going to be a semi-mobile unit, and I did bring some pictures of what that looks like when it is set up. So we were unpacking our instruments and our gear and was ready to go into, after we got into France then, we traveled around and we were on bivouac part of the time, and just in getting ready to, whenever the troops went, and an evacuation hospital, it was so many evacuation hospitals were assigned to assist and go as needed to wherever as the front line moved up, then we would, it was like a, you moved up as you were needed in this, wherever the front line, there were 8 of us, I think, 8 different semi-evacuation hospitals that moved. It was like MASH, you've all seen MASH, probably some. So that's the way our unit functioned. So our patient output depended on where we were in relationship to where the front line was. So our first actual setup, when I didn't mention, but when I was in Arizona, I did sign up. There was a sign-up sheet if you got too bored, where you could take this class in anesthesia, giving anesthetics, because we were short on those people. So I signed up. I was bored. So that showed up on my papers then when we actually were going to be assigned. Oh, well, you gave anesthetics. Well, of course I hadn't given any because we didn't have any patients. But they assigned me to a station hospital. So for 3 weeks I got a lot of experience. I worked a lot of hours, but it was very good. I will say I have never worked or been in a place where everybody was functioning as a unit. There was great teamwork, and all the doctors were very respectful of us, and we had a great captain who was a head nurse. All nurses were commissioned as second lieutenants when we did go in, so there was not to be any fraternization with the enlisted men. We were officers. So, and that's the way the atmosphere was generally. So anyway, we're back to my story of where we were when I went there on detached service to really get some clinical experience in giving anesthetics. And then when we were set up for the first time and the only time we were ever set up in a building, we started functioning as a hospital in Heerlen, Holland, which that was right when during the time frame of the Battle of the Bulge. And so I was assigned to give anesthetics for an orthopedic surgeon, which that was where a lot of the casualties were. Our setup was there, it was all in a triage situation, and they went out and evaluated who the most pressing injuries were, and they came to us as there was a team that assigned who would be assigned to what doctor and what team. So we functioned there all during the Battle of the Bulge, and then we had all kinds of casualties, and most of them did not stay in our hospital for more than 21 days because we had to keep our turnover going, and they were sent back to a station or a general hospital for further treatment. So we functioned in that assignment at Heerlen until the November. Let's see, no, we went there in November. And during our time period there, the buzz bombs, they were going over us. And I remember the big discussion if that was Bed Check Charlie or if that was really a buzz bomb. So, I think we all looked for humor in different ways because we had some, the casualties that we were receiving needed our serious attention. And we did, I of course, giving anesthetics, you did not have a lot of verbal contact with these men that were coming there, but they all were, a lot of them were very young people. I was only 23, but they were 18, so they are 19. And we were there because we wanted to be, and I think that was during the time when the draft was in session. So you really felt a lot of real admiration for all of our casualties. And I worked with a very outstanding team. I thought our doctor was a trained orthopedic surgeon, and we had nurses who had been in the operating room for years. So everything went smoothly, and we had a lot of supplies. Any supplies that we needed were there, and we had very high-class supplies. So they did receive good treatment, which I felt a real honor to be a part of that team. After Herlin, we went on from Holland into Germany, and that was the way, as I say, we moved according to where the front line was, and we functioned there until VE Day, all through Germany, until June the 6th was D-Day. So then our unit was disembarked, and we received some of the casualties wherever we were. And then I see my time is growing there, so that, as you know, women always like to talk. But I just want to say, I always felt it was an honor to serve, and I was proud to be a nurse in the United States Army. And I do feel that during that war, and I hope it's true now, that they all received as good a treatment as we tried to give.
Thank you very much. I was just thrilled when I found out we were going to hear from a woman veteran's perspective. We've had women serving in the military since the Revolutionary War, and so I'm really happy we were able to give Bea some recognition here today and to hear her fascinating stories. So now we're going to move from World War II to our next conflict, which was Korea. And first up is Norman Kiehnau from that era. Norman.
Okay, I came to talk about the Korean War. 63 years ago, last June 25th, the North Koreans attacked South Korea. They took the capital of South Korea, Seoul, because Seoul is not too far south of the 38th parallel, which separated the two Koreas. So it didn't take them long to get to Seoul, and they captured Seoul. Well, General MacArthur is in the head of all the American forces in that area. So he already got to thinking, if they're going to take Seoul and then they're going to march south, I'm going to order a 1st Marine Brigade and the 7th Army. We're going to put them on ships. We're going to come up into Incheon, which is just west of Seoul, a short distance, and we're going to take back Seoul. And he did that. Now, they attacked the 25th of June. MacArthur took back Seoul in the last week in September, so it took that many months and weeks to organize and take back Seoul. So then he immediately ordered the 7th Army, you people go north, you take over the capital of North Korea, Pyongyang, and then you go up to the Yangtze River that separates China from North Korea. You go up to that river, and then you have your territory taken. In the meantime, he loads up his ships with the Marines and the Army. He goes all the way down around South Korea, up the east coast to Wanyang, and there is a seaport there. So to get into that seaport, they unload, they go to the Chosan Reservoir. Everything went good. The Marines and the Army even celebrated a Thanksgiving dinner in November of 1950. Then all of us, matter of a couple days, the weather turned, and it got extremely cold, like down to 25 below zero. And our men are not equipped for the cold weather. So they try to hurry up the winter supplies, the winter clothing, the winter boots. But a lot of guys had frozen feet, frozen hands, and then besides that, in come 5 divisions of Chinese soldiers, because they could walk across the river just on the ice, so they went undetected. They didn't have to use any bridges, because we had blown those bridges up already between the two. So they just walked across on the ice with their equipment. Of course, they didn't have much equipment. They just had the men, 500,000 men. They all had their weapons. So we were outnumbered, like about 20 to 1. So our Marines and Army, they killed a hell of a lot of Chinese, but they just kept coming and coming and coming. So we had to evacuate. We had to get back out to the seaport. And my buddy Orvie Kugler, whose picture is right back there, he got captured by the Chinese. Luckily, they had him next to some trucks lined up. And when evening came and the shadows came, Orvie ducked underneath the truck and he snuck away on them. He got out of there. But he had frozen feet, a frozen left hand, which the Chinese hit with his rifle butt because he had put it in his pocket to keep it warm. So he sneaks away, gets underneath the bridge, and him and his a little South Korean soldier, they start walking south. Orvie's walking south, and he's walking and walking, and finally he sees a Jeep moving down there. The Jeep was Marines. They're out there driving around, picking up scattered Marines or soldiers that are trying to escape. So they pick up Orvie. They take Orvie to the seaport, put him on a hospital ship. So now Orvie's out of it. He's taken care of. Anyway, a little bit more about Orvie. They patch him up over in Japan and they send him back to Korea. So anyway, now, then the Chinese, they want to head south because they're going to push the South Koreans right off the tip of Korea. But in the meantime, MacArthur, he's up at the border of China, and he sees the Chinese over there. He says, well, we'll just go over and we'll knock off all the Chinese too. But when Harry Truman heard that, he fired MacArthur. You ain't gonna start a war with China. Well, I think MacArthur had the right idea, because MacArthur didn't interfere with the Chinese then, and then they all came over, 5 divisions, and they beat the hell out of us. We had to get out of there. But then that gave them time to organize the United Nations. We were, and all the while this is going on, I'm in Camp Pendleton, California, training for Korea. We have infantry training. We have cold weather training. Cold weather training is when they put you out up in the mountains where the snow is about 4 feet deep. We have 80 men. Well, you have to walk 8 miles to get in there, to get to where you're going to be camped. And some of the guys, their legs kind of gave out. And this one little guy from Chicago, I remember his name was Caldwell. He said, Norm, he said, I can't make it. I said, well, hang on to my pack. We had an entrenching tool in my pack. And we had the sleeping bag back there, we had our rations back there. Hang on to that entrenching tool and I'll pull you up. Just give you a little support. So he made it that way. So that's what we did in Camp Pendleton, cold weather training. Then they put us on a boat in San Francisco. About 16 days later, that was a Sergeant Maurer we got on. About 16 days later, we ended up in Hawaii. Of course, we didn't know where we were going, but we had a couple Japanese Hawaiian boys in our outfit. One was Robert Yoshida, the other one was Leslie Higa. And we come around Hawaii, and these two boys said, well, there's Diamond Head, and there's the Royal Hawaiian, and the Surf Rider, and the Moana. So we end up in Pearl Harbor, we get off the ship, we go to Camp Catlin, that's right off Pearl Harbor. And there we did our training for close air support. We had Makua Valley in Oahu, Hawaii. We'd sit up on the mountains. The aircraft carriers would come across from the States. They'd stop in Hawaii. And we'd go out to Makua Valley for a week and we'd train the pilots, because our officers were pilots also. So they'd talk to the aircraft carriers, and they'd send the aircraft carriers the grid, the map of our area, the grid, and they'd tell the pilots where your target was. You're in grid A or B, you're in section 1 or 2, now you find your target. And we'd sit up in the mountains and watch them, and they'd find their target. They come with Corsair planes. The Corsair was a gull wing, single engine, one man in the plane. They could do strafing, they could do bombing, 500-pound bombs, 1,000-pound bombs. They could have napalm, and they'd hit their targets. Those Corsairs were something else. They could just about go straight up or straight down to hit their target. We had no jets. The jets weren't around then yet. So then from after they trained in Hawaii, then the aircraft carriers went over to Korea, and we had 3 teams over in Korea at the time, 2 up on the front lines, 1 in reserve, and all of their officers were also pilots. So it was pilots talking to pilots. So they knew what those guys up there were up against. So they'd guide them into targets. And those 3 teams over in Korea, then eventually after we trained for a couple of months in Hawaii, they sent us up over to Korea. Of course, we flew all the way from Hawaii to Seoul, Korea. We stopped at Johnson Island, Wake Island, Midway Island, Guam, Japan, Osaka, Seoul, Korea. Then we get to Korea and they put us on this old rickety train. It was in a cold fall night, rainy and damp, and the windows are broken out of the train, and we're sitting in these slotted benches. Where in the world are they taking us? So they take us up pretty close to the front lines, the regiment. And then we get up there, we relieve our 3 teams up there. They go back to Hawaii. Then 2 of our teams go up on the front lines, and 1 stays in reserve. And after you're up on the front lines for 40 days, then you get back to go to reserve, and somebody else takes your place. So we did all that, and we were attached with the Korean Marines. That was on the west coast of South Korea. And then we gave them close air support, because whenever they wanted to take a hill or give the Chinese or the North Koreans a little fight, they'd call in the close air support. You guys go up in there, you drop your bombs over on the other side of the hill where they kept all their equipment and their ammo. You hit their ammunition dumps, you hit their equipment, whatever trucks they had. Although the North Koreans didn't have much equipment, like we had everything. I never saw an enemy plane in the air. I never saw a helicopter, enemy helicopter in the air. I don't know if they didn't have them, but we sure had them. Some of those airstrikes would be 40 Corsairs up in the air, bombing the position that the Korean Marines wanted to take over. And this went on just about every day. Call in the close air support, call in the close air support. Of course, then the Korean Marines would go up and they'd get in a firefight with them, they'd get wounded, but they always carry their wounded back. They never leave anybody behind. They carry them out. Then we'd call in the little Bell helicopters, like they did in the MASH program. They always gave the Marines credit for starting that MASH outfit. You'd get the wounded, bring them back, take care of them, then they'd go back up and get some. They could only put 2 wounded on each little Bell helicopter. And of course, this is mostly at night when these guys are up there. Then one time we were loading up these wounded guys. You shoot them full of morphine, so they're out of it. They didn't know what was going on. Anyway, this one helicopter, it's at night, no lights on. He thinks he's going where he wants to go, but instead he's going this way. He slammed into the side of the hill. Of course, the helicopter shot. The 2 wounded men, we take them off, put them on another helicopter. They didn't get hurt. They didn't know what happened. Got them out of there. So anyway, then all the while this is going on, the United Nations comes into effect. We had United Nations, we had Australians, we had British Marines, we had the Hungarians, we had the Turks, the French, the Germans, the Canadians, Australians. They all had their section of property that you protected. That would be on the south side of the 38th parallel. So we really had equipment, and it seemed like the other side didn't have much equipment at all, but they had the manpower. When you get 5 divisions of Chinese, you don't need much equipment. You got enough guys to take care of everything. So that kind of that slowed down the war. Then they started with the peace talks. And then in 1953, they finally signed the peace accord. And that was at Panmunjom. Panmunjom we could always see from our position, because they always had the blimps flying around up on Panmunjom. So anyway, the war kind of slowed down. We got back to Hawaii. Eventually, I got back home. When I brought my sea bag back home to Kiehnau Road, that was, 50-some years ago? And 2 years ago, somebody calls me, what do the numbers 1197667 mean? I said, that's my serial number, Marine Corps. Why? Oh, we got a sea bag here of yours that my nephew bought down in Casanova, Wisconsin. That's right near Richland Center. He goes to an auction show at auction sale at a hardware store, and he buys 2 sea bags, and one of them was mine. So it's back home in Institute now. So that's enough about the Korean War. So I could tell you a lot more, but my time is up.
Thank you very much, Norm. And if you didn't have a chance to see his exhibits before we started, please be sure to take a look. And I was just astounded when I saw his sea bag there. What a small world that he got that back, and that was just tremendous. But he's got a very, very interesting display, and he brought a real nice display box for Orville Klugler with all of his medals and awards. And Carl has some things, and Bea. So be sure to stop over here afterwards and take a look at those mementos. So Ray tells me we saved the best for last.
Yeah.
We're going to hear now from Ray Hogan, and
Surprise.
yeah, he was in Korea in the Army from 53 to 55, and he served as a combat engineer. So, Ray Hogan.
I got a little to add to Norm's story here. Orv Kugler was in the medics, and when he went and hit himself, there's other soldiers with him. They took them down to the bottom and they shot them soldiers. He laid under the truck in the shadows there, and you heard them all shooting, and the soldiers hollering as they're shooting them. Well, I got in the tail end of it, which was kind of lucky in a way. I started out with the 6th Armored Division, and then I went to what they call the Hells Force. That was Port Leonard Wood for basic training. Anybody who was there knows what I'm talking about. And after basic training, they put me in the carpenter school. So I put my time in the carpenter school. And after carpenter school, they shipped me over to Korea. They shipped out on a boat in California and took us out to the St. Patrick. Got on to St. Patrick, and they fed us spaghetti and meatballs. We got out there, she got rough. And you want to see a mess, spaghetti and meatballs and the bunks and all over? Well, me, I ducked myself on. I got up to the top deck because I sure didn't want to get KP the next day. I stayed there all night. And I don't know what took so long, but it took us 16 days to get over the Seoul. Sitting on the boat, no place to go. Little PX so you could run in and out of you. And if you had money, but going on, we didn't have the money with us. Just lay out of the rifles. They got over there, they got out in Seoul, and then they transferred me to the combat engineers. They sent me over to a Marine base where we made slabs. I don't know what they're for. All we did was made the slabs. They never put nothing on them. I didn't see many soldiers there either at the time. Then after that, they sent me over to Uchon, or Yangtze it was. In the middle of the winter, we rebuilt the Yangtze Bridge. They couldn't do it when it was warm in summertime. They had to wait till it got cold, then they sent us all over there. We knew we were going, but you know the Army. So we got down over that, and then I worked out all right for a while, and then we got back from that. We had a few skirmishes in there. May Day was always a bad day over there. There was always somebody coming around shooting something. We did one thing, though, we got away with it. These people over there were called Papasans. And on their back, they could carry a 50-gallon barrel of fuel oil. And I got pictures of them doing it. They used to come to the barracks and steal it out of the fuel dump. And the guard duty and that, they steal them up. And then one day, Butch Mauser was his last name. He was from Chicago. We were on guard duty. And he said, Ray, when that guy comes back, you shoot a hole in that barrel. So I didn't think nothing of it. You get back when they weren't doing nothing from stealing. He told them, but they just let him steal it. So he got out through the fence. He lit a match to the barrel. And Papa saw it coming. He dropped the barrel, and he was gone. But the barrel went up in the air. I'm lost. After we built the bridge, and they sent us back and put us on road duty. We had Koreans doing the work, but we had to supervise what they're doing. They start building road and chipping off the mountains and stuff like that. We put a lot of time into that. And then there was time to go, but 6 months before I left, they transferred me back to the 6th Armored, and I run the PX until the time I was ready to go home. But I almost didn't get home. The second lieutenant, he was kind of a hot little deal. Thought he had big things on his shoulder, you know. Called us all out in the line the week before we're going home. Put us in standing attention. He says, went to the Oliver, and he says, how about relisting? how about relisting? And he got down to me. He said, how about this? I slipped out of her mouth. I said, stick it. I went, oh, that wasn't nothing to do. It wasn't for old Sergeant Stewart over there. I probably had been in the barracks. But we did a lot of work with the firm over there, and it was kind of, the kids did a lot of work with the kids over there. The kids really liked us, get a little candy and stuff like that, and give them, I got pictures of all that kind of stuff. But other than that, that was about the most I put in there. But the worst was that Yankee bridge in the cold in the weather, rebuilding that thing. Oh, the main reason I said stick it, because when they put me, I had a squad, the D squad, and I had made corporal and they froze rank. I couldn't make sergeant. Oh. And that's what popped out of me right away. I said, just stick it. Well, the work of a sergeant, but you couldn't get the rank.
Well, if you had made sergeant, you probably would have gotten down. You still would have come out as a corporal.
I wouldn't stay in service.
Saying that, yeah.
But the way I look at it now, maybe it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
Time I was hell, I ain't gonna take them kind of orders from nobody, but you get back out here, you get the same thing.
Yeah.
That's about my sense of it.
Well, thank you, Ray. We're going to open up now for questions. So if there's anyone in the audience that would like to ask one of our veterans a question, raise your hand, and we're going to try foregoing the microphones this year. Just see if you can talk loudly, and so everyone can hear your question. And so I'll open the floor. Is there anyone that wanted to ask anything of our veterans? I'm going to start off. I'm going to pull rank a little bit, and I wanted to ask Bea if she could tell people what a buzz bomb was. There may be some of our younger people that aren't familiar with what was unique about buzz bombs.
Well, it was an unmanned, I suppose, similar to what they have now. That was the original unmanned bombs that they were sending from behind where we were, which we were certainly not on the front line, but we were only 8 kilometers from Aachen, which that's where Germany. So that's about all I know. They made this real distinct sound, and when I don't know how it was controlled. Maybe when they ran out of fuel, probably. Then they went down to where their original. They were a manner of attack on the enemy line.
So you wanted to keep hearing that buzz, because once it stopped and got silent, then it was going to be falling.
We really didn't want to hear that bomb. We didn't want to hear that noise cease.
Yeah.
Which they did. There was one that really did go, whatever. Yeah. And then that was, and it was right when a lot of the people were in this building that had a lot of glass, because we got a lot of injuries, and unfortunately it was a lot of eye injuries from all the flying glass, because there wasn't any eye protection at that time. But our hospital, which we didn't have all specialists, but it was fortunate during that instance, because there was an ophthalmologist who was on our staff, so a lot of the GIs got the attention they needed. But that was the story of the buzz bombs.
Yes.
I'm really not a military-minded person, so obviously, so I don't know all these details.
Is there someone else then out in the audience that had a question? Any of our young people have something they were interested in that maybe was mentioned, or that they've heard about either World War II or Korea that wanted to ask about? Yes, there's a young man. You want to stand up so everybody can hear?
What were their careers when they got back to America?
So how long did you all stay in the military when you got back to the United States? And then if you got out, what did you go into?
I got out right away as soon as I got back. Fort Sheridan, just to transfer it out, so I get out.
So did you
But then we had reserves at that time, yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was 4 years, 5 years, 2 years.
I had 6 years.
6 years, yeah, 6 years reserves, but that was just basic, didn't do.
Did you come back home here to Door County then? And
Yes.
did your military training help at all, that combat engineer
Well, I
training?
helped with the carpenter work a little
Yeah,
bit.
okay. How
Rough
about you, Norm?
carpenter, I ain't no good carpenter.
How about me? I came back home to Kiehnau Road where the farm was. That's where I left my sea bag. And then I went to Milwaukee. I got a job at a Chevrolet dealership in Milwaukee. I stayed there for 13 years. Eventually, I got to be service manager there, and it was a new car dealership. And then eventually I came, after being with Russ Darrow for a couple of years in West Bend, I came back and bought Institute Motors.
Yeah.
So I've been there for 26 years, and then I sold it to my worker, took care of the Sevastopol school buses with Carl Scholz.
And did a great job,
And,
Norm.
and you were the best boss at Sevastopol,
Well, thank you,
I
Norm.
think we ever had, yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think you're the only person who thinks that.
Yeah?
No, but thank you, Norm.
Oh, there's a bunch of them out there think that,
Yeah,
Carl.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you come right back home after you got out then, Carl, or
Pardon?
did you come right back home after you got out of the Army, or?
Yes, I did, Deb, and I went to school at Madison. And stayed
Was that
there
on the
for-
GI Bill, or
Pardon?
was that on the GI Bill that?
Under the GI Bill, yes, and they got several degrees and then came directly to a place of glory. You know, Sevastopol is
Yeah.
a Greek term, and the Greeks named it after a beautiful spot on the Black Sea and a beautiful harbor. They named it Sevastopol, which in Greek is a place of glory, and it truly is that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I've been here since then. But I have some other things,
Okay.
but maybe someone has a question, but I have something in regard to something.
Okay, and I'm gonna.
Oh, okay,
I've
that's
got you
fine.
on
Don't let me-
deck for that, but
Don't let
I
me,
was just gonna give Bea a chance. I'm sure that
impose on someone
your,
else.
the things that you were exposed to while you were in the Army, you got experience that you never would have gotten here stateside.
That's very true. It was a terrible, I'm not advocating war, but as a nurse, I certainly learned to function under circumstances and dealing with was generally a healthy population that we had because they were young, vigorous men, but the circumstances that we were functioning under were abnormal. So you learn to function as a team and know that everything, if you have healthy people, your outcome's gonna be good. You learn to move around.
Yeah. And let's see, was there a question up front here?
With having that experience.
Yes.
When you got back here and got into a regular hospital, was it hard for you and the other doctors to adjust to the systems and what you had to do and formalities? And when you said, no, I want this, if you do this, you can actually fix a guy because you actually might have had better techniques because you've seen more than the people here?
Well, it is an interesting question. When I came back to Chicago in 1943, I could not really get a job because during, it was because of the times. During that time, they had started the cadet nursing program, and so the hospitals were all well-staffed because part of the educational training that they were receiving, then they had to agree to stay at that place for a certain amount of time that was in repayment for their education. So I went to different hospitals, and it was nothing, any reflection upon my ability, but there were no vacancies in any of the hospitals that I tried. Now, I didn't go to every hospital in Chicago. And then I had a friend when we went to, because we had relatives, so we'd go see them if we could get a job. We went, this was in Decatur, Illinois, the same thing. And my uncle, about stood me on my head because he said, oh, I said, I can't get a job. He said, well, you don't want a job, you want a position. And I did. So then we went to St. Louis. So to answer to your question, I finally, I did private duty for a group of psychiatrists that I had known in Chicago, and then I worked as long as I wanted to do that, but I wanted to just really get back. Living in Chicago, as anybody knows, it came back. There wasn't any apartment available. You know, it was a big influx of people, and I got back later than some, so there really was not any choice of an apartment. So,
And that is something that happened not infrequently with our women veterans. When they came back, all of the positions were being filled by all the men coming back. They sort of got first preference. And so it was kind of an abrupt change for a lot of our women service members who had been in positions of authority and a lot of responsibilities, and now they come back and, well, just go back to being, you know, the housewife track, and it was an abrupt change. So, yes, there was another question here?
I want to know, when you were a nurse, what was the attitude of these wounded men when they came back? Were they resentful, or did their patriotism and what they did for their country be more important?
well, and because of the location that we were in, we were the first hospital that they were in, so we treated the immediate injury. And I tell you, they were so glad to be away from the front lines that they were just felt more secure, and they had a bed to sleep in, and just to see a woman was a real relief for them, I think, because as I say, most of the, but does that answer you?
They have a good positive attitude. I'm glad that I could serve my country, and my patriotism far overrides any injuries that I sustained.
I believe generally they were thinking they were glad at that during World War II. I think they did feel that they contributed, and I didn't feel any resentment. Now we got quite a few injuries that we call them self-inflicted ones, because they did shoot their feet. You know, they would shoot their feet, so they would not have to go back into the front lines. But I think that might have been the individual people. I mean, being on a front line as part of an infantry, I would think would be very intimidating and fearful
Stressful,
for these young men who were there. So that was the only thing that I witnessed. Generally, they were just so glad to be where they were, to be taken care of for their injuries. I never heard anyone express any resentment towards our country or their position.
Yes.
Was, at that time, people were very patriotic.
Yes,
Very
that's
young
exactly
women,
right.
others went into service. I don't think y'all would have had to go, but they were, I mean, our country was attacked, and they were gonna go over there, and.
That's right.
That's right.
I think World War
Isn't
II,
that- I don't
Yeah.
think it's that prevalent. Patriotism is not that prevalent.
our society has changed.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Carl's, that sort of leads in well for what you were wanting to have a couple minutes to talk about. You had brought in a flag over here.
Yes. Did anyone here participate in any of the honor flights? Anybody? Here?
Oh, good.
I wonder if Mr. McFarland would like to say a word or two about the honor flights, and I'll say something about what I have over here.
Sir, have you gone on the honor flight? Because you may want to just go ahead. I haven't been on one.
No, I haven't been on one, but my son just made arrangements for me and
great.
brother-in-law to go from Ozaukee County.
Maybe Dennis would like to say a word about the honor flags.
First person account. I'll shut up and let
Oh,
The welcome we got was a lot different than what I got when I came back from Vietnam.
I'm just going to back up just a second. It's Dennis Ott, and he's a Vietnam veteran.
And Desert Storm.
And Desert Storm.
When I landed in SeaTac in 1967, we had to walk through chicken fence wire to keep the people from spitting on us. Honor flight, when we landed in DC, they held us on the runway for a while because they had to wait for the fire trucks to come out and do the cannon, because we got there early. Everywhere we went was crowds of people to welcome us home. Got back to Oshkosh, there was over 12,000 people. So the welcome we got this time on the honor flight is completely different than what we got in the 60s when we came back. And one of the things I found amazing, American Airlines donates the planes. The crews donate their time. They're doing this on their days off. I mean, they're not getting paid for this, which I found very amazing, that they're doing that. So the honor flights you are treated completely different than the original welcome.
I'd like to ask, are there any other Vietnam era veterans in the audience? If they'd please stand up. All of our Vietnam veterans, please, please rise. Let's give them the welcome.
Can I say something? This really freaks me out because in the last 2 years, I've been said thank you to probably 20 times. In the 40 years before that,
Never.
Never. And thank you.
I've said in the last 2 years, there's been at least 3 times I've been into a restaurant and I had my hat on. I go to pay my bill and somebody tells me it's already paid.
I need a hat.
I was in Kiehnau parking lot after the store, and there's I'd say 13, 14-year-old boy coming across the parking lot, trying to come over and shake my hand and say thank you. So as far as the patriotism that you were talking about, it's coming back. It's taken a long time, but it is coming back.
Thank you, Jesus.
I think what Dennis's story also should be telling veterans out there who have maybe considered or it's been suggested to take advantage of the honor flight, whether you're World War II, they're taking Korean veterans now, and they're working towards taking Vietnam veterans. They had a special...
That was a one-shot deal.
Well, the Vietnam veteran, that was a special flight during EAA, but that will be working towards our Vietnam veterans, you know, in the future. Everyone who is gone is so thankful that they did. They will take care if there are any physical needs that, you know, you're worried about. They make accommodations. You do as much as you feel up to or want to do. You don't have to go to every memorial, but if you have the chance to get on one of the flights, we would all strongly recommend you take advantage of it because it seems to be an experience you'll never forget. So. Thank you very much, Dennis, for sharing your...
One other thing I wanted to share too is, when we came back, one of the stewardesses on the plane was telling us a story, which there was a bridge in one of the villages that was supposed to be blown up. There was a soldier that went out to blow it up, waited for a peasant to come across. He noticed the peasant was carrying a bundle inside the baby girl. He gives the peasant gives the baby girl to the soldier gives it to his commander or whatever, carries that bundle over 200 miles, finds an American captain and gives the baby girl to the American captain, gives it to an orphanage. He gets back to Michigan, finds out where it is, he adopts her. She grew up American. She served 17 years in the Navy. She now owns a business consultation firm in Washington DC. And her thank you to us and other veterans was to be on that plane, to come around and first to thank every one of us for her freedom. Stories like that are not told.
I think the nice thing my husband told me, I had two husbands, one was in Japan, South Pacific, and the other one was in the Battle of the Boat. But, you know, in spite of all their injuries and whatever, he said, oh, we were the lucky ones, the unlucky ones were laying over there.
To me, everybody, you know, a number of people call me heroes. No, there is no live heroes. There's only veterans. There is no live heroes. Heroes are the ones that never came back.
That's true.
I'm not a hero. I just did my job.
Oh, you did a good job.
Yeah, the hero didn't come
Thank
back.
you. Thanks, Dennis. Okay, Carl, you wanted to say something about Flag Day.
Yes, and first out, as long as we're talking about heroes, I should tell you about the living skeleton. How many of you have seen the living skeleton? Some of you have seen it. Well, I stupidly didn't plan in advance to have it copied, but Linda's making some copies of it. Can you
Can we just pass it around, Carl? If we promise to get it back, or?
Yes. Could you make copies of that?
She wants to pass it around,
Yeah,
Carl.
I hate to be away from the computer because I'm gonna be using it for a minute,
Oh,
but we
okay, well,
could
then
pass
just
it down
pass
the
it around.
line here.
But
Take a
it's
peek.
current because this was a classmate of mine at Fort Washington, Wisconsin. And I ate 8-cent school lunches. He went to Harry's Lunch and got hamburgers. And he was in the Battle of the Bulge, didn't run fast enough, and the Germans caught him. And he was in a POW camp, and it doesn't look like he's a living person. But a film is just made called The Honor Flight, and he is one of those who has a great bit of his presentation in that honor flight. But his name is Joe Demler, and his father was a vet in Fredonia, Wisconsin. But it's unbelievable if you look at that to think that anyone could survive that. He was the assistant postmaster in Fort Washington until just a short time ago. But I have something about the flag for some reasons that's very important to me for several reasons. But, my birthplace was Waukesha, Wisconsin, and we had a neighbor who was so impressed with the fact that it was a flag day, was that it had become a holiday. She made these things cruel. You said these are cruel flag designs. And how many of you know Henry and Mary Scheib? They were some of the first people to build on Glidden Drive. Is Katie here today? The daughter? Well, some time ago I asked Katie why her father was so interested in Flag Day, and she said that his birthday is on the 14th of June. But Henry became very interested in Flag Day because of that. And he was AL at that time. He was CEO of AL, and he and AL contributed a substantial amount of money to restore the Stony Hill School and buy land for it.
Excuse me, Carl, we have some people here that want to get to the next show at 3 o'clock.
Oh,
And we had
that's
a
right.
little short video to play for them, so
Oh, I'm
thank you
sorry.
very much for your story.
Oh, okay.
We'll do an interview by you alone sometime.
Yeah, sorry.
okay?
I didn't realize that. Sorry.
So you can check with Carl on that. We'd like to share, thank all of our veterans for sharing their remembrances with us here today. And we want to thank you for your service and your sacrifice that you made to help preserve our freedom here and abroad. As was mentioned, there is a Veterans Day concert. Peninsula Symphonic Band is going to be at Prince of Peace Lutheran Church starting at 3 o'clock. So we'll try to get you out in time for that. I wanted to thank AMVETS Post 51 for providing our service flags that we have on display here. And, oh, he already slipped to the back. I wanted to recognize our County Veteran Service Officer, Scott McFarland, for all that he does to help our veterans in the county, and his assistant, Betty Hart, who also does a great job. So at this time, we're going to see a video that was recorded of our Sevastopol High School choir this past week, and of medley of different patriotic songs.
representing the families of all of our American servicemen. I'm very proud of what the United States has been doing in the last 30 to 40 years. When I was left alone, we had no support groups. Nobody even knew I was around. But if you ever get the opportunity to financially or otherwise support these groups throughout the United States that are helping these young families, their husbands, the children's fathers, they've gone to Afghanistan 3 times. And it tears a family apart. And I'm just so proud in seeing these young kids that these children and these families are being looked after now. And please, if you have an opportunity, support that. Thank you.
Okay, we've got one last quick comment here.
I also want to say that I grew up with these 2 guys.
Our condolences.
Yes.
Now, that's a few years ago. And I'm very proud of them and all the veterans of our county.
Thank you.
One final imposition, we certainly should thank Deb and Linda and Laddie and others who planned and made this nice event possible.
Thank you, Carl.